Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 122. Firstly, I want to send out a heartfelt message to those folks who support the Journaling with Nature podcast through donations and through Patreon. For those who have recently joined me on Patreon and those who have donated through my website, thank you. Your support means the world. And as well, of course, those who have been long-term supporters of the show, I want to send a big virtual hug to you all. It's your support that makes it possible to do this podcast, and I'm very grateful for that. If you're a listener who enjoys the show and would like to support it for as little as $1 a month, you can do this through Patreon, and a link for this is in the show notes. Today I'm sharing a conversation that I had with Jamie Solomon. Jamie is a parent educator from Malaysia. She connects with the natural world through her journal and through poetry, and she spends time nature journaling with her children, but always with respect for their desires and needs and without pushing the practice onto them. We talked about the ways that motherhood has sparked Jamie's creativity, the practice of going deep with relationships and nature, and the challenges of nature journaling with the family in the tropics. Let's listen. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Hi, Bethan. It's so good to be here with you. It's a morning for both of us on this side of the world, and I'm very excited here and honored as well. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you for doing this podcast so faithfully for many years, because I often listen to your podcast when I'm nature journaling, and I'm just so inspired by the speakers and you yourself. Thank you.
Oh, that is so kind. And I am really excited to get to know you and your story. And as a podcast listener, you will know that I love to go back and sort of trace the roots of the story and where it all started. And I find that often looking into people's stories, not always, but often there's roots in nature experiences in childhood. And I'd love for you to describe to me your earliest experiences of nature.
Right. So I know that you asked this question to your speakers, and my first thought when I thought of this question was like, no, I don't have any nature experience.
Mm-hmm.
But when I thought about it even more, I realized that I do, right? And I'm going to take this time to share my nature experience with you. So I currently live in the city, which is very close to Kuala Lumpur, which is our capital here in Malaysia. So I'm going to give you a brief history and geography about Malaysia. So I grew up in this small town in Taiping, which is 3 hours north of Kuala Lumpur. And this town is actually it's called Taiping, so in Chinese, it means peace. So it's a very peaceful place to live in, and until today, many retirees go back to live in Taiping because it's just so peaceful. So the British came to Malaysia many years ago, and they found tin deposits in Taiping. And so they mined the tin there, and after a while, after the tin was exhausted, they turned it into a very beautiful garden. So until today, the local council keeps the garden really very beautiful. So I grew up with that beautiful garden right smack in the city. And another thing about Taiping is that it sits at the base of one of the hill stations in Malaysia, which is called Maxwell's Hill. So Maxwell's Hill was named after a British gentleman as well, right? So you see the British influence in Malaysia. So when I was young, I would go up the hill. So when I was younger, as a family, we would go up there by jeep. And when I was stronger, a teenager, we would hike up, So as a family, we would go up there and we would have church camps there as well. So that was a regular practice. So I grew up with a lot of greens, a lot of nature around me, right? So I think that was a good influence for me. And being a girl from a small town, I was very active as well, going for walks and hikes with my friends. We would cycle around town. We would swim in the river. It was so nice. Yeah. And I was also a girl guide in school. And so it was a lot of outdoor activities for me. I love camping. I love learning to start a fire. I loved cooking outdoors. So this was part of my childhood. And I think my father also played a role in my childhood. My father was a school teacher and he loved gardening. So when he came back from school in the afternoon or in the evening, he would go to his garden and spend hours in his garden. So we had a fairly big garden, and he would plant tropical fruit trees. At one stage, he had orchids. And what amazed me was that he knew all the names of the plants. Up to today, I was like, wow, Dad, you know the names of these plants? Yeah. And let me share with you a short conversation that I had with him when I was young, which I still remember to today. So there was one day, I think I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I can't remember the exact details, but I was looking at some birds, and they were in the garden, and I just happened to ask him, Pa, what birds are these? Not really expecting an answer from him, but he told me, oh, that's a sparrow, and that's a myna. And until today, I was just, I remember I was just blown over by his answer, because he knew the names of these birds. Now, these were the common names and not the specific names, but I think that was my first kind of introduction to birding, and I still remember that till today. So my parents, they were not intentional about teaching us about nature, but it was just, a way of life. If you're in the garden with me, I'll tell you more about this, but I'm not going to pull you
Yes.
out from the house, to take you to the garden and give you a gardening, lesson in the afternoon. Yeah, so that was my childhood pattern.
Ah, what beautiful memories. And how wonderful that your father was that quiet influence, not teaching in any way, but just sharing those names and the experience of being outdoors with you. I
Mm-hmm.
love those memories. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Most welcome.
I'm really interested to know, so you gave us this beautiful description of the garden in the city, and I'm wondering what nature looks like where you are and the ways that you personally access nature most often. And I wonder if that's in your garden. Is it in the city parks? Is it in forests? I know there's a couple of really important locations for you, and I'd love for you to talk about those places that you access nature in your day-to-day life.
Right. Okay. So Malaysia sits on the equator, and it's really hot here because we have this tropical climate, and it's either really hot certain times of the year, or it gets really wet, certain times of the year. So we have these two extremes in weather, and I would say that it is actually a challenge to nature journal in such weather conditions. So there are days that it's so hot that when you step out of the house, you begin to sweat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really a challenge. And of course, when it rains, you just can't nature journal outside as well. So we just have to make do. I guess for some people living in the northern or southern hemisphere, you think that, wow, it's so nice. You have spring and summer all year round, but
Yeah.
it's not the case. Yeah. So I'm thinking, the opposite. Wow, you guys have 4 seasons. So that's amazing. So anyway, we as a family started nature journaling in 2021. That was during the lockdown. And I think many people started that practice during the lockdown. So we only had our garden and our neighbor's garden to go to. So we started there. And because of the weather, I would plan it in such a way that it would be comfortable for me and especially the kids. So we would do it quite early in the morning. The sun was out, but it wasn't as hot as it could be in the day. So we would go out in the garden and we would do our journaling for about maybe tops 30 minutes. And then we would come in, and I wanted the kids to share with each other what they learned, what I noticed, I wonder, it reminds me of. And I wanted it to be a shared experience between all of us. So we did that for quite a while. And when the lockdown eased, we were able to go out more to the city parks. We were able to go out hiking. And so what I did was I usually paired a physical activity with nature journaling. So sometimes I would say, okay, let's go for a hike. And then we would pack our journals in our backpack. And after our hike, we would sit somewhere to nature journal. It didn't always happen because, like I said, it's challenging here. And usually after a hike in the tropics, you're just dripping wet. And it's really hard to keep your journal dry as well, you know. And the kids are tired, they are
Mm.
sweaty. Times they just tell me, Mom, I just don't want to do it. And I just let go. I say, okay, that's fine. But can you give me 5-10 minutes to nature journal myself? And they would do that. They would do that. They would sit under the fan. If there is a fan, they'll fan themselves and cool down while I try and maximize that 5-10 minutes that I have. So I think we work something out. So what I'm saying, it's not always easy to journal here. So when we can, we do it, and when we can't, it's okay. We will always have another time. So that's what nature journaling looks like for us here in our home. But there is a place that we go to very often, and that's called Fraser's Hill, which is about 2 hours drive away from us. And I mentioned a hill in Taiping, and then there's another hill. So these hills were discovered by the British because they were looking for a cool climate, a place with cool climate that they could go to for the weekend because they couldn't go back to England all the
Mm.
time. It's just not possible. So these hill stations in Malaysia, which are still around, was discovered by them. So this hill station that we go to as a family, we went there about 7 times last year. So it's like almost every other month that we go there, and it's just lovely. So the climate is, of course, completely different, and it's so cool. I can spend hours outdoors and I don't sweat, even though I walk so much. And it's just really nice. It's a very quaint little town. 92% of this area is still pristine forest. And so it's really back to nature. They have kept development to a very low level, so there's not much development. Many people have mixed feelings. Some people go there and say, oh, it's so boring. Some people go there and say, oh, this is lovely. It's also a birder's paradise, and it's called
Mm.
National Bird Area, IBA. So it has been designated as such. So you get lots of birders going up there. So my nature journaling practice is kind of half here down in where I am in the city, and half up there in Fraser's Hill. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I love that you do it as a family and that, you acknowledge that, yes, there's challenges because of climate. Yes, there's challenges because of kids get bored or their attention for the process is shorter than yours, but you found ways to get around that. I love that. And you also wrote about how one of your children in particular, but the others as well, loves to bring you nature treasures to journal. Can you talk about that little relationship where they bring you things to journal?
Right. Okay. So we have 4 children, and my eldest is 18, and my youngest is 8 this year. So we have 3 boys and a girl. And my eldest, I didn't get a chance to introduce nature journaling to him, and I kind of think that he's past the age of being taught nature journaling. And if he does pick it up, it will probably be his own discovery or his own journey with nature. So
Yeah.
I still have a chance with the younger three, so my 15, 13, and 8. And my youngest, I guess being the youngest, he is more excitable about things outdoors, whereas my teenagers are more, staying indoors and
Yeah.
yeah, not so excited about the world, the outside world as such. So when I nature journal, it's our regular practice is to go to the playground, our neighborhood playground, every Sunday, late morning, and all 6 of us will be there. My husband will be playing, sports with the kids, and I would be sitting under shade with my nature journal. Yeah, so that's our regular practice. And I don't tell the kids to nature journal during that time. It's really free play for them and time
Mm-hmm.
with their father. And so I will be doing it. And my youngest, one day he just surprised me, Mom, I brought some nature treasures for you. I was like, wow, this is so sweet. I mean, I didn't ask him to look for, look out for
Mm-hmm.
things, but he brought a seed, he brought a leaf, and he said, I think you will like this. Please put it down into your nature journal. So that was like a very sweet gesture, that he did, and it's and I definitely put it down in my journal. It's certainly something to remember. And since then, he has been bringing. Of course, there are times that he forgets to bring, but that's okay. He knows that I nature journal and mom likes these things, and he takes the effort to look for things that he thinks is interesting that I would like to nature journal. So that's a sweet memory I have as a family.
That is delightful because you are inviting him into the process, even if he's not there with his journal.
Mm,
There's a reciprocity. There's a relationship with him and what you create in your journal. He knows that his actions have led to you drawing that in on your pages, which is really lovely.
it is, and then when I show him the final page, he
Yeah,
gets really happy, that, and it's fun both ways. It's a
yeah.
win-win for both of us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'd love for you to talk about a little bit more about motherhood because we've talked about coming to nature journaling, but there's also this idea of creativity, and um, some people believe that or have said to you that. Oh, you have such a creative talent, which is also, it's always a funny thing to be told because, in fact, it's a skill that you're developing over time, and you've written about the fact that you feel like motherhood has ignited your creativity in all sorts of ways. And I'd love for you to talk to us about creativity and what that means to you and how you came to feel like you are able to be creative, and in particular how motherhood sparked that in you.
Right. Thank you for that question, Bethan. Um, I think how it started was last year. I started posting some of my work on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, particularly Facebook, because your friends follow you, and so
Mm.
the group of people, your friends that you have, and I think they were as surprised as I was that I could draw. You know, it's like some comments would be like, wow, Jamie, you're so talented, or wow, Jamie, you're so artistic. I didn't know you had this skill. Well, I didn't know I had that as well. So, um and I think I at that moment I just had that thought, I just wanted to post something encouraging,
Yeah.
especially to mothers. I think I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I think as a stay-at-home mom, sometimes it gets a bit lonely, and you
Mm.
find that you're on your own journey and you're not out there with people. And the nature of your work, because you're looking after children, looking after the home, you don't always see results, and they're not immediate, and not like when you're out in the working world, you get, immediate feedback. And being a mother, it takes years and years and years before you actually see something. So it's a long process. And I think sometimes, this motherhood thing, it's really important, but it's undervalued and underrated. And
Absolutely.
so I was beginning to draw, and I thought that, hey, I let me use this as an encouragement to encourage mothers, because I was reflecting on my own life, and I was thinking, where did this thing come from? I'm not artistic, I am not talented, but I'm sure that there is something in my past that has led to this, you know. And I linked it to motherhood, and I just like to give you two examples that I wrote about in the post. And the first is about, making meals. Um, as a mom, working or non-working, I think that many times, our fridge has a little bit of this, a little bit of that, leftovers here and there. be it cooked food or just, raw ingredients. And it doesn't fit perfectly into a recipe. You can't open a recipe and say, oh, I have exactly, these types of food in my fridge. And so many times I've had to take a bit of this, a bit of this, a bit of this, and come up with this dish XYZ, and it's edible, and I discover like, hey, I created something new, So that's one example. And the other example I thought of was clothing. And having 4 kids, we have quite a bit of clothing for the kids. And because we are, a relatively big family, people tend to give us lots of hand me downs as well. Okay, you have 4 kids, okay, just take it. So we end up having lots of, clothes. And sometimes it's not a perfect match, maybe the shirt is torn, but the pants, you can still use it. And you get the idea. So I think another area of creativity is where I've learned to mix and match clothing. Okay, let's take a blouse from here. Let's take a skirt from here. Let's take a matching pair of socks from here. And then you look decent, So I think that through the years, and my eldest is 18, so I've got quite a number of years of experience just learning to put things together and making it work has honed my creative skills, and I think that has found an outlet in art, and that has come much later. Yeah.
Yes. It makes me so happy to hear you make that connection because, yes, motherhood is deeply undervalued in our society, and the need for creativity and thinking on your feet and problem solving and all these things is something that we deal with every day. And
Yes.
your story about the food reminded me of my own mum, who I remember as an adolescent standing in front of the fridge and looking in the fridge and thinking, oh, there's nothing to eat at all. We've got no food in the fridge. And my mum would say, oh, I'll cook something. And she'd make this gourmet meal out of nothing. It was like...
So nice.
It was like magic. And
Yes.
I love that you recognize that as the source of your creativity. And I'm wondering what happened next. So you said you found nature journaling during the lockdown and you started developing this seed of creativity inside you as an expression in drawing. I wonder how that happened. How did you find nature journaling? How did you start drawing?
Okay, so just a bit of background. I'm a parent educator, so I homeschool our children. They were young, and when we started, we used this approach, philosophy from Charlotte Mason. So basically, Miss Mason was a British educationist, and she was a strong promoter of nature studies. And so I was exposed to her teaching very early on. But because the kids were young and because of the challenges in climate that I shared with you, it was always here. I was like, wow, it would be so nice. One day I'll be able to do it with my kids. So it's always been here. And in 2017, I believe, I through the homeschool network as well, I came across John Muir Laws website, and again I was like, wow, this is so amazing. One day we are going to do it. And I think it happened only in 2021 during the lockdown, and I'm glad it started, although it was a little bit late, but not too late. Yes, so we were at home, and of course we couldn't go out, and I thought, yeah, now is the best time and the best place because we do have a garden. It's not a big garden, but we can start here. So what we did was I would show them, I think John Muir Laws has this short video series called Nature Connection, if I'm not mistaken, which is for, I think, school children, So it's a very short video, about 10, 12 minutes. And these video series are topical. So they teach a new skill each time. And so what we would do is at the beginning of the week, when we're having lunch, I would just put on the iPad for them and say, okay, let's watch this while we're having our meal. And it's very easy to learn, it's very enjoyable, his videos. And so then once we have learned that skill from the video, during the week, I would plan for us to practice what we learn, in outside in our garden. And so that worked for us in 2021. It wasn't a weekly thing, it was more like a monthly thing. And but even for that, I'm so grateful. So we did that first in our garden, and then neighbor's garden, and eventually we would go out to nature journal when we have hikes, or when we have picnics in the playground. We would try as much as we could. Um, so in 2022, I wanted to take it up a notch for myself, and I didn't want to impose it on my children. Okay, let's do more of it, because I was mindful that although I love nature journaling and I think that's the best practice, I didn't want to push it down. Their throats. I didn't want to make it not fun for them. So I decided that for myself, I was going to be more serious about this, because it was kind of still in the lockdown, and I still was at home quite a lot. And I thought, okay, why not? Let me just be more serious about it. So last year in February, I made a commitment to myself that I would nature journal once a week, just once a week, which was doable for me. And so usually that happened in the weekend when everything else was done with, and I had some time by myself, for myself, and I would nature journal. And I told myself that to keep this practice up, I'm going to start posting it on social media, particularly on the Facebook nature journal page as well. So I think that kind of created that accountability for me. Okay, this is my commitment. It wasn't to anybody; it was just to me. But it worked. It worked, and I started that way every week, and just thankfully up to today, I'm still doing it. So it has been 1 year of fairly consistent practice. I mean, I've not, of course, there were periods of time where I could not nature journal, and particularly when kids were sick, or when we were just, our schedule was just different. But in general, I've kept up this practice, and I'm so glad I have done that.
Yes, that sounds so meaningful that you've found this beautiful practice and you've made that commitment to yourself to do this because it's important for so many reasons. And I'm wondering, now that you've sort of hooked in with the networks globally, I'm wondering about the nature journal networks in Malaysia, and whether is there a big community doing it there, or is it a small seed community that we hope will grow in the future?
Well, actually, the nature journaling community, I didn't know of anybody in Malaysia who was nature journaling until I started posting my work on Facebook. And then I began to get to know some individuals who were nature journaling. And some of them would reply, either private message me or just comment my post. And that's how I came to know about them. There is no network to say in Malaysia. It's a very new practice. And so there is no community like maybe what you have in Australia, in Brisbane, or of course in America. But we don't have a community here. Nature is I think because of the pandemic, many people do appreciate nature more and more. And because of the international restrictions in travel, that made a lot of people travel in Malaysia. And thanks to social media, a lot of beautiful areas were discovered. Many people started going hiking, camping, and wow, I didn't know Malaysia was so beautiful. I do want to go to Borneo one day. It's just so beautiful, and just to see the beauty of that place. So we don't have actually a network or a community here in Malaysia yet. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to connect, individually with individuals who practice nature journaling in Malaysia. But like I said, there are nature artists, there are wildlife photographers, and different people engage with nature in a different way. But nature journaling, not yet. Yeah, so it's I would say a fairly new practice.
It's lovely that you said yet, because I think that there's so much scope for people connecting and just meeting up with people, inspiring each
Mm-hmm.
other, and just realizing, oh yeah, that's what I do. And sometimes people are doing it without even knowing, and
That's right.
making those connections is really important and wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you've been doing it for some time now, and you say that your confidence has grown and your style has changed a bit over that time. And I'm really interested to hear more about the changes that you've noticed in your journaling practice over the time that you've been doing it.
Yes, I think that when I started, it was with very simple tools. I just had a paper and a pencil and an eraser, and it wasn't even a proper sketch paper. It was just a normal paper. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
again, this was in back in 2019, and we were on a family holiday in Fraser's Hill, the hill that I mentioned earlier. And I just wanted to try drawing. Yeah, I've never drawn since school, and that's a long time. I just took art classes in school, and that was it. I never had the confidence, and I think that affected my desire to draw as well. So I never had that. But like I said, because of our homeschool journey with the kids, I came to know about nature journaling. I thought I do really need to try and start somewhere. And so I sat down in the park bench, on a park bench in Fraser's Hill. I had that time to myself. The kids were not with me, and I brought out my simple tools, and I just drew what was in front of me. And I spent 3 hours sitting there just drawing, erasing, just making lines. It was all black and white. And that 3 hours just went by so quickly. And I was feeling so happy, to be able to do that. And when I looked at my finished work, I was like, I think I can draw.
Yeah.
And I showed
Wow.
later I showed it to my husband, and he is the creative one in the family. He's a designer, so he has that flair, and I don't like to use the word talent, but he has the eye, for
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, wow, I didn't know you had this in you." And I took it as an encouragement. So I started with really basic tools, just a pencil, a paper, and eraser. And I then decided to add some color to it. And I wasn't willing to invest in any set yet. I just used my children's color pencil set, and I really took my time to use whatever I had with me at home. Yeah, because I mean, my philosophy is that if I can get it done with whatever I have, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of money buying something that I may regret later on. And furthermore, I was very new in this whole journey of nature journaling. I just really wanted to take my time to discover the whole practice, because to me it wasn't the tools as well. It was what the practice was doing for me and what I was discovering through the practice, and I didn't need special tools for that. Yeah. So I really was just enjoying the whole process. And yeah, so I mentioned that I made a commitment to myself early last year to start, nature journaling, really start nature journaling. And I decided to invest in some books, again, not expensive ones, but just some better quality paper. And I did some research about color pencils as well. And I eventually got a set of watercolors. So it was really a very slow progression, and I just added this a little bit here and there. Then the next step, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. I didn't buy a whole lot of stuff because I knew I wouldn't be using them really well then. Yeah. So, and just to maybe encourage the listeners, I really started with zero knowledge about this whole thing. Know there was such thing as watercolor paper. I didn't
Yeah.
know there was squirrel fur brushes. I didn't know so many things. And I just want to share with you a joke here. So I was looking at different color watercolors, and I know you have those branded ones, the Winsor Newton, you have the Daniel Smith, And this honestly was way out of my league, last year. And it's still something that I'm working towards, but not yet. So anyway, I came across this Winsor and Newton set on Shopee, which is our online shopping platform here in Malaysia. And I looked at it and it's like, this is 10 ringgit. I was like, wow, this is such a good deal. And 10 ringgit, it's like $2, $3.
Okay.
Like, no way, I'm going to get the set. And so I bought it and I was so pleased with my purchase. And I used it for months and months. And I didn't know that it wasn't the real thing until one day I just don't know why. I thought, okay, I think I bought an imitation set. I didn't, not the real thing. But then I thought like, hey, I actually used that set for so
Yeah.
long. It served me, and you know what? I am still using that set up to today. And I think it was Roseanne Hanson that said that, she, because she uses a very minimal set of colors, and she said that, to go deep into what you have instead of, just buying different things. And so I thought, yeah, that's really a very practical suggestion, which I want to, adopt. And so I've just been using that set of 12 colors. It's a cheap set, it's an imitation set, but it works for me. So I think for me, it's not so much the tools, because I think that if I go too fast into the tools, and then it just becomes, a practice in making something beautiful, which I really do not want it to be that way, because I really appreciate and enjoy the process of nature journaling more than the output, the finished work. Of course, I like to look at something pretty, and it does help to, wow, I did a pretty page, it looks nice. But, many times it's more what it has done for me, the effect that it has on me, and the changes that I see, or even, the thought processes that I've had. It's just wonderful, the whole practice, yeah.
Yes, well, let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because we have the tangible changes that we can see when we've been nature journaling for a while, and there are obvious changes about the style we're using, or the techniques, or the materials. But then there's also the changes internally, aren't there? They're less tangible but so significant. The changes that nature journaling makes within us. And I'm wondering, you touched on it a little bit, but I'm wondering for you about how nature journaling has changed you as a person.
I think nature journaling has allowed me to slow down a lot, and I think, I mean, it's not new for me, because I do like to slow down. And prior to coming to nature journaling, I've kept a diary for many, 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 many years. And so I am comfortable with, pouring myself out on paper. And I think that that practice is, going deep to understand myself, and, whatever I'm going through. And so that has been a process or a way of life that I've had for a long time. So when I started nature journaling, that process came along with me into nature journaling. And so I do like to, go deep into my page or my exploration. And it often becomes a time for me to reflect on maybe what's going on in life, or and I get the chance to, it's like nature journaling is like a trigger, that leads me into further exploration about myself. Yeah. And many a times my nature journal page, is not in the strict sense a nature journal page where you have the I notice, I wonder, it reminds you of, but it has it's like a diary entry, you know. So I may be taking a walk in the park, and then I collect, whatever I find that I want to put on my page, and then I draw it. And then when I start writing, the words just begin to flow. Okay, I may start with something like, okay, the metadata, of course, and then where I am, or this is what I'm doing, the weather is like that, and then it's very natural for me for that to be to flow, for that external thing to flow then into me, for me to be able to connect with nature. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's something that I find is easy for me to do. And so it then becomes like a diary page for me, you know, and that's how I go deep to understand myself even more. So many times my pages, I don't show them to people because they are really
Yes.
private. You know,
Yes.
it's my thoughts, my feelings at that time, and of course, when it's less of that, then I'm comfortable with showing people. But I think my nature journal pages are just a really a mix of everything. Sometimes it's more scientific, sometimes it's more about me, sometimes it's somewhere in between. And I like that it's a platform for me to explore myself. I don't always have the answers to everything, of course, but it's just something for me to help me think more clearly about life.
That's a lovely way to express it, help you explore and think more clearly about life. Yes, that's right. And you have mentioned it a few times just in passing, but you also have written about it that you prefer to go deep with something than go wide. And I really believe that this is valuable and important in our relationships. Having deep relationships where you are committed and invested in growing something with someone else, be it a partner or a friend, a friendship or a family member, than having just hundreds of friends that you never really go deep with. And I think it's the same, like you said, for our tools, getting to know something really well, or exploring nature, the things that we spend time with and really get to know in nature deeply it's there's something really profound about that, I think. And I'd love for you to talk about that experience in your life, what that looks like for you, this idea of going deep rather than spreading yourself wide.
Right. Okay. So I mentioned that I've been keeping a diary for many years, and I think that has really helped me to connect with myself. And I think that I do connect with myself, or I understand myself a lot more than how people would understand themselves. And I love having a cup of coffee with a friend and just going deep, in conversation. And I have a handful of friends that I meet with regularly, and we just talk about really deep stuff. And I think that's really important for anyone to have a close group of friends to go deep. And let me give you an example of going deep. So I like to have mini projects for myself. I think that helps me keep going in terms of nature journaling, and it gives me some structure and not like, oh, what do I do today? So currently I am learning about the backyard birds in Malaysia. So it's my own project for me to learn. And my first bird that I started on is called the yellow-vented bulbul. And I just started this last month, so March, and now it's April, and I'm still on this bird. So let me give you an example of going deep. So there's one day I just, had a blank page, and I look at some pictures on the internet, and I started sketching it in black and white. So I sketched the whole bird. And then the next moment I thought, okay, let me just focus on the eye, and I just sketched the eye. That for me is an example of going deep. And then I sketched the beak. That's like a zoom in, zoom out kind of practice. And then I sketched the beak, and I was looking at them and like, wow, these are so beautiful. Birds have such beautiful eyes. And I didn't know that. You won't know that until you start drawing. And then I decided, okay, the wing is going to be a challenge, but I do want to try. So it was a practice of observation, but it was also trying to up my sketching techniques. So it was a kind of two-in-one. So it was a big task for me. I'm not a birder, but I thought, okay, let me try and just copy, draw the wing. And so the next week I thought, okay, let me do something about this yellow-vented bulbul. So it was all pure sketches, all in graphite. And then I thought, okay, let me go in with color this time. So I drew another two birds, and I put in some colors. So that is my example of going deep into a particular subject, right? And then I was so excited when a neighbor friend, who is also my friend on Instagram, discovered that I'm doing this, and she said that, you know what, there is a nest, a yellow vented bulbul nest in my front porch, and I'm going to give you this nest when the birds have fledged and they don't need the nest anymore. And I was like, wow, this is so amazing. This is really, really going deep for me. I just can't wait to get my hands on this nest and just have a few pages of really understanding this bird. And it's not just drawing this bird, but it's also learning to understand the calls and the songs that this bird makes. And I like to know as much as possible, about the particular object or the subject that I'm studying. So for me, that is one aspect of going deep. But there's also another aspect of going deep that because we talked about how it helps me to connect with myself. And this happened last year. So I was starting nature journaling, and I found that there were many times that when I was journaling, because of the connection that I had with the subject, the object, and because it helped me to connect with myself, I found myself, you know, um, just expressing myself in poetry, you know. And so when I was drawing something like even a dead leaf, a leaf that I found on the ground that was decaying, actually I called that Brown Beauty, and that became the title of one of my poems. And I just looked at this, I was drawing, and this thoughts just started connecting in my mind, about this brown thing, it's dead, it's dying, but still, in that process, it's teaching me something, you know. And there was that, yeah, going deep connection with something that's dying, And
Yeah.
I drafted this poem, and I really like it because it was my first poem, and it's actually about aging, right? So it was an issue that I was going through. I'm in my 40s and I'm aging, and this leaf helped me to understand that aging is beautiful. That aging, even when this leaf is aging, it's decaying, yet it's giving me something. And I was thinking, yeah, even when I'm aging, I'm growing old, I still have so much to offer, to others, in my family, my friends. And it was very inspiring. So that's another way I have gone deep. And I like to, start with something, just leave it kind of open for a little while, not close it, and then sometimes the thoughts come back in a different way or angle, and then I explore it more, and then I leave it until I feel that it's done. Then I find,
Mm.
oh, okay, I find some closure in it. So it takes sometimes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even a month before I finish exploring something. So that's how I go deep, Bethany.
Wow, I love that you let poetry and nature teach you things about life, and I think that that's really important. And I have done the same thing, particularly with aging, because perhaps we're a similar age, and watching nature change over time is beautiful. And to take that lesson and say, my own maturing and growing older and changing and developing in different ways is beautiful as well. It's a very special thing to take a lesson from nature. And I love that you did that through poetry as well. Let the words sort of sink into you. Let the message go deeper inside you. And you turn some of your poetry into an ebook, is that right?
Yes. So what happened was in March and April last year, my whole family was down with COVID. And while they were suffering, I was thinking this is the best time of my life because I don't really have to cook. I don't really have to do lessons with you. I'm at home and you are in bed, and I have time to myself. And it was about 3 weeks. And honestly, Bethan, and my family knows this, I tell them that it was a really good season for me because it was a period of inspiration, and I've never felt inspired like how I did last year. And so it has a special place in my mind and in my heart. So I started nature journaling, and I would take, like for example, the leaf, and I'd turn it into a poem, and then the next day I would like, okay, I want to draw this, and then turn it into another poem. So in about a few weeks to 2 months, I had a compilation of 15 art pieces with their associated poems. And I've never done this in my life. So I was like, oh, this is amazing. What do I do with this? I had this question, what do I do with this? I mean, I think we all sometimes question this. Is this just for fun? Is this a hobby? Or, is there more to it, that I can do with these things? I shared some of these on social media, but not all of them. And I had this question in my mind, and I was thinking, what do I do with it? And one day I came across this book, which is a very old book, and this lady, Betty Young in Malaysia, she wrote this book. It's a poetry book, and she had 18 poems in it. And she wrote about everything from Brussels sprouts to lizards to chickens to dogs. And she, of course, wrote about serious stuff as well. Then I thought, oh, this is my answer, And if, she could do it, I think I can turn my poems and my art pieces into a book as well. Now, I didn't want to spend money printing a book, and I called it an ebook, but it's actually really a compilation of my art pieces and a poem at that time. So so in a span of a few months, I again was reflecting on my life, and I was thinking, I became an artist, I became a poet, and I became an author. So it's like, wow, this is so amazing,
Big. It's really big, yeah.
it's really big. And so, I mean, that gave me more inspiration and more encouragement to keep on going. Yeah, so that's what happened with all the poems. And I've since written many more poems. So I've got about like 50 poems in all.
Wow.
Of course, I like some of them more than I like others. But I like them because they are my life, and
Yes.
I am in that poem, and that poem has affected me. So it's a very strong connection. Every time I write a poem, there's always a strong connection with the poem itself. And that makes it very, very special.
Yes, that is really special. And so you have this, this new life. Essentially, there's something very important that's growing inside you, and you sometimes call art. You've written about how art is a connector of sorts, and I wonder if you can talk a little about art as a connector, and the ways that it's connected you with other people, but also with yourself, your internal landscape, with nature, with your own faith, because I know that faith is important to you. I'm just interested in all the different ways that you would say art and nature journaling is a connector.
Thanks for that question, Bethan. Yeah, so let me start with art as a connector with strangers. So I think the first time I experienced this was when we went for a holiday last year in June, and we 6 of us, we were living on a boathouse for 4 days, and we were on a lake in Malaysia together with 40 other people, and they were all strangers, and being in a boathouse for 4 days and not being able to go out until we are moored to a certain place, makes it uncomfortable because you're with strangers. But it's also a good opportunity to learn to make friends and to connect with people. And so what I would do was, it wasn't intentional, but I was just I brought my nature journal, and the boat was moving most of the time slowly, and we had books to read and all, but I brought my nature journal as well. And so I would sit by the boat, in the boat, at different locations, and I'll be looking out and drawing, sometimes standing, sometimes sitting, and people would peer over my shoulder and just look at what I was doing. And so I think that art is a connector. It's a very good icebreaker. So many times they would look, and I would look back, and sometimes we would just exchange a smile, and that was a good start to it. And There were language barriers as well because there were some people who, couldn't speak English so well, and I couldn't speak their Chinese dialect so well, and so we couldn't communicate. But I remember one elderly parent just looking up at me and smiling and doing this, after
A
looking.
thumbs up.
It was so nice. It was so nice that we could connect in a non-verbal way. But let me give you more examples. So I think as I did it more often, as the days went by, people got more comfortable and say, "Oh, can I pull up a chair and sit next to you? And I just want to see what you're doing." And I said, "Sure." And many times they started conversing with me. Said, "Oh, I see you like drawing. I actually like drawing too." Then they would start opening up, and then they would say maybe, "Oh, I write poems as well. I write poems in Chinese." And I said, "Wow, that's so amazing. What do you write about?" And then we would start conversations, and it was so easy to talk because art. I think a nature journal it's a very neutral subject, and people do not feel threatened by it. And there was one man, he just also sat down with me, one young man, and he was thinking about his future. And I think what I was doing just, gave him that idea to talk to me about his plans for the future. So I see you like nature, I see you like drawing. I say, yes. Is it something you're passionate about? Oh, yes. I say, I'm passionate about. And what about you? What are your dreams? Oh, then he started, I have this. And I think at the end of the whole trip, I just felt that I gained so much, from it. And I just made so many friends. There was one mom, single mom, who came for this trip. And after, looking at my work, she just started pouring out her feelings to me. And it was not surface conversation, many of these. It was intimate. And I think that nature journaling just was a right springboard to spring into these topics. And it was a very special time, a very special holiday for me. Yeah, so that's how I connect with strangers with nature journal. And I think that it's a way for me to connect with myself as well, especially through poetry. And like how I mentioned, I like to go deep. And it helps me to uh, tune into myself. It helps me to tune into my surroundings. And I have, it has helped me many times to understand my faith as well. So I have a Christian faith. And many times when I connect with nature, and because faith is something that is really a part of you and you can't separate it from your life. And when I look at things or when I, perceive things, my faith would naturally, be part of it, be part of that process. It would kind of filter my lens about how I see things. So when I see nature, that faith part of me would naturally come in. And many times when I write or write a poem, there would be that faith aspect because I see God in nature. I see His handiwork in nature, and so for me, art is a place that brings a lot of things in my life that would naturally be separate, and it connects everything for me. So that's how meaningful it is because it helps me make more sense of the separate or disparate things that would are in my life. So it has helped me to understand my faith more, and because God is a big part of my life, and so I do write about that in my poems.
Yes. It's lovely to hear you talk about that. I think it is again about going deep with connections with others and with yourself. And in the very beginning, you told me a story about how your dad was important for you, quietly exposing you to nature. And there was a moment where you had a creative moment with your father. Would you tell that little story?
Yes. Okay. So my dad is quite advanced in age now. When he was young, he was really active. I mentioned earlier that he was an avid gardener. I would call him my botanist, yeah, and he was an amateur birder as well. And when he was really young and like a small fit, he was really active. He would, besides gardening, he was, playing football with my brothers. And when he was younger, he would go into the jungles of Malaysia, look for nice pieces of wood, and then bring it out and treat it, until it looked so beautiful. And he would hang it on our wall. It would be really beautiful, nice wall pieces. And he was also into things, crafty things like copper tooling. So copper tooling is quite soft copper, and he would, I don't know, dexterously with his ability and with the tools, he would carve something beautiful out of that copper, and again he would put it on the wall. And I remember once when we were young, I think 12 maybe, he taught us, my brothers and I, we were sitting at home, and he taught us how to paint. And until today, I remember that it was a seaside scene with a boat at the side and with coconut trees, just at the shore, and some wooden houses. And yeah, so he did play a big role in my life now that I think of it. When I remember my childhood, I remember my dad playing that role. So there was once that we were on a short holiday again in Fraser's Hill. And because my dad is pretty old now, he has limited ability to move around. And so I was nature journaling. I brought a pink flower, and a seed back home to the apartment. And he was just sitting. He likes to sit and look at what I'm doing, and that is a very special moment between us. And I just thought, hey, Dad, why don't you try? It's not difficult to draw. You have the skill, okay? You have done it before. And he was saying, oh, I haven't done this for so long, and I said, just try it. And my mom was in the background. Yeah. You should do it. You should do it. So I gave him a pencil, a paper, and a pen, and yeah, he drew it. He drew his the flower and that seed, and I said, "Wow, well done! This is your start, to nature journaling." And he hasn't taken it up since, but I'm glad that we shared that moment of connection with each other, and he has a beautiful garden still, but because of his limited mobility, it does keep him from going out too much. But yeah, it was a nice moment of connecting with someone special in my life over nature journaling.
Yes, how special. I think that's really it's life is about these moments, isn't it? It's about these moments when we make a connection with someone else or with nature, or just those. Life is made up of those points, and if we remember that they're special, if we remember to value them, then we can have a really full, rich life that we will look back on later and realize, yes, those moments were gold.
That's right.
Tell me about what keeps you going when you come up against challenges or limitations. What's keeping you going?
I think one challenge that I mentioned is the weather here, and because I like to nature journal as a family, it does limit our ability to do as much as I would like. But I think we've overcome this challenge by doing it in the hills. So I tell myself, okay, we can't do it here now every day at least, but when we go for our holiday, we can do it. Another challenge that I had was learning to draw. So I mentioned that I had this fear of drawing and this, this lack of confidence about drawing. But I knew I really wanted to take up this practice. I love nature, and I love the journaling practice. I've done it for so long. So that combination of nature journaling was like, wow, this is explosive, and I want to be part of. I want to do this, and I knew that I had to overcome the fear of drawing. And I would say, I wouldn't really call it a fear, but just that, just like lack of skill or practice or know-how of where to start, what to do. And two quotes helped me to overcome this, and I just like to share. One is very common among the nature journaling circle, which says that you're not learning to draw, but you are learning. You're drawing to learn, and that was a big mind shift change for me, because when I was able to reframe that and think that, oh, this is really not about drawing and it's about learning, and I'm really big on learning. Wow, let's do it, you know. And the other quote I'd like to share with you comes from uh, Charlotte Mason, the British educationist that I mentioned earlier. And this is what she said in her book. This is what we wish to do for children in teaching them to draw, to cause the eye to rest, not unconsciously but consciously, on some object of beauty which will leave in their minds an image of delight for all their lives to come. So that was another game changer for me, because what she was saying, I mean, she simplified drawing for me. She was saying that, well, if you can see, you can draw. And I was thinking,
Yes.
yes, of course I can see. And if I can see, yes, I can draw. So those two quotes, sayings, helped me to overcome my initial challenge of resistance to drawing. And I think that's, yeah, no looking back now. I've made progress. And of course, I still try to improve my drawing by, learning online from online classes and all that. But that was that helped me to start, drawing. Um, Challenges, I think time is always a challenge, but I accept it as something as this is the stage of my life. I think we all go through different stages of our lives and different seasons. And for yourself, probably, your child is young, and
Yes.
that's a certain season of your life. My kids are growing up. I've got teenagers to, to manage at home. That's quite challenging. And so I try and just make do with whatever time that I have, and just accept that, yeah, why, even if I may not have as much time as I would like to, I'm still learning, and I'm still enjoying it when I get the chance to do it. And I think one more challenge I'd like to share is just about nature journaling as a family. So I mentioned that we like to go out together and nature journal at the end. But I'm also recognizing that different people, my children, my husband, they connect with nature differently. So I don't want to be a nature journal snob and say that, oh, this is the only way that you do it. This is the best way, and you cannot do it, any other way. So my husband is a very good example of how he connects with nature. So I mentioned that he's a designer, so he's always problem solving and all that. So he likes to observe. So he likes nature. He likes to observe nature. And his way of doing it is that he will look at, for example, spider web. He will look at it. He will use his phone camera, take pictures of the spider web from different angles, even take a video of it. And that's his way of connecting. And he does that quite often, even in his work life. And he would take pictures of how a cat behaves or how a grasshopper he sees. And then when he comes home, he would tell us, hey, come, let me show you what happened today, what I saw today. And so he's really high on curiosity, which is amazing, because it's something that, I should learn, because, we want to be curious when we are in nature. And he also likes to take time lapses of cloud movements. And that's his way, again, of connecting with nature. So it's mainly through technology, which is fine with me, And so I'm learning. It's not a challenge, I guess, but just learning to understand that different people have their own way of connecting with nature, and learning that my children have their own way of connecting with nature as well. So we often go for walks. Like I said, my teenagers are like, this doesn't really interest me anymore. But I think as a mother, I still try to, put in a bit of that nature in them. And sometimes I just say, oh, okay, let's all look for one bird today. And then you can tell me what bird you saw. And sometimes after 5 seconds, they forget what I said. And then we don't do that, right? But I'm hoping that, one day when they're on their own or with their families, they will remember the wise words of their mother and say, yeah, my mother used to say this, look for this bird. Let me look for a bird now, And yeah, I think that, there's little things that we do as well. It's not lost. Yeah, it's somewhere. It's part of them. And just letting them explore nature on their own, I think just letting them form their own connections is something that I've learned to accept. Yeah.
Yes, how beautiful. How beautiful that you are planting seeds inside them without expectations, without putting your own agenda on them, but just, and also modeling a love of nature and a curiosity, and also recognizing that yes, people can make that connection. You make that connection through your nature journal, and a lot of the people listening also make their connection through the nature journal, and other people make a connection through a photograph or paying close attention through technology in whatever way. And those are all wonderful, valid ways of making a nature connection too. I
Mm-hmm.
think your philosophy is very wise and beautiful.
Thank you.
So you've got this new amazing thing happening inside you, creativity, a love of nature journaling, and you've started sharing that through teaching nature journaling. And I would love to hear more about you started your posting things online, nature and art with Jamie, and a YouTube channel, but also in-person nature journaling. And I love to see what's growing here, and I'd like to hear about your experience, taking this thing that you found and sharing it with
Mm-hmm.
others through this.
Yes. I never planned for this to happen. I think that the journey of nature journaling has really been a very surprising journey for me. And it has helped me to pick up new skills, not just, about science and about art, but about technology, about event management, even, skills related to technology. Like, how do I post this? Initially, I did not have any Instagram account. And I was like, oh, what do I do? I had to ask my children to help me. And then, starting a YouTube channel was like, okay, I know I have to start somewhere. And I just like the learning that takes place when I am challenged to do things that I've never done before. So teaching nature journaling was not my intention. And I think coming from an as a parent educator, I think there is something in me that likes to teach, and maybe other people may see it more than I see it. And what happened was, yeah, I just was posting my stuff on social media, and there was one time my husband and his friends, they were going to Fraser's Hill, and they just asked me, oh, can you do a story walk of Fraser's Hill? I was like, oh, okay, I haven't done that before. But then I was thinking that I am probably, a good person to do it because I've had so much experience there. And I do not want to discount that fact. And I thought, okay, I will need to do research, I would need to share accurate facts about Fraserville. And, so I had to research and probably rehearse a few times, and but I did it. It was that first time last year which I did it, and it was my first time. So story walk meaning I would tell stories, and then we would take a walk, and then we'll stop, tell stories. It's like a guide, tour guide kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was very lovely, at least for me, and I got some good positive feedback from the people as well. And early this year, I had just a month ago, we had two families who wanted to do this as well, and they are family friends, and so we all arranged to go up to the hill, and I did a similar thing for families, but of course, this is a different crowd with children. I had to, kind of tailor the walk, the presentation, tweak it a little bit to suit the audience. And we also had rain halfway, and so unexpected things. And children sometimes they want to do this, and
Yeah.
no, 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 come down to the group, and it's all that little challenges. But again, it worked out really well, and that's my kind of two experiences teaching nature journaling to two different crowds. I don't know what the future holds, and I'm not actively looking to teach nature journaling. But it's just like, oh, if you approach me, if you ask me, then I may consider why not, right? And I started nature and art with Jamie on Facebook and Instagram, Um, and like I say, I like to not just share, but I like to learn how to do things. Like when I started, I had no idea how to make reels, and like, what is this? How do I make a reel? And my sister-in-law, my children had to help me, and sometimes I would do it, and I ask them, "Is this okay? Is this a reel?" And they would give me feedback. And the YouTube channel, I thought that, okay, I think this is a nice progression at this stage of journey that I'm in. And I do follow some nature journalists on YouTube as well, and I like that their YouTube is very raw, and it's not curated. It's very normal, if I could use the word. And I like that it's not high tech, or it's not something that I cannot do. So that really helps me try and push myself to do it. I don't know how many people view, but that's not the point. I just find it a joy to just share what
Yeah.
my journey, and to learn new skills as well. Mm-hmm.
How delightful. I wonder if there are any final words of encouragement that you would extend to parent educators or other nature journalists who are walking the same path as you.
I think my first word of encouragement is that you can start anywhere, and you can use recycled paper, you can just use a pencil and eraser, whatever you have at home. And it's not about the tools or the materials that you have. It's about the process. And like you say, it's not the product, it's the process. And I think that having a commitment to yourself helps. I think I'm a fairly disciplined person, so it helps to put in that pencil miles, and work, towards getting better just through that daily or weekly practice of nature journaling. And for me, what works is doing it alongside with my kids, so that it's not a separate activity. And I guess it works for us because time is also a constraint for us. And we recently started on a nature education program, my kids actually, but I as a parent tag along so that I can learn what they are learning as well. And I find that it's really good because, again, it's a win-win, and they learn, I learn, and we can come back and talk about some of the things that we learn, and I think that's special. And a word of encouragement, I think finally what works for me is little projects that I have for myself. It's just for me, it's just my way of keeping myself going, so that I have like short-term goals to work towards, and not like, oh, what do I do today? So that I think that's some words of encouragement that I would have for your listeners.
Jamie, it has been absolutely heart-opening, delightful to talk to you. You're amazing, and I'm so happy to have had this chance to hear your story today. So thank you for being part of the podcast.
Thank you so much, Betten. I enjoyed myself, and thank you for asking me really good questions that have, really got me thinking about this, and it's really helped me to understand myself better as well. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jamie. I loved her quiet and gentle style, and how she described the way she encourages her children to connect with nature through journaling, encouraging but not pushing them, and remembering that different people connect with nature in their own different ways, and respecting that in her family. During our chat, Jamie mentioned a video series by John Muir Laws, which was important for getting Jamie and her family started with nature journaling. This video series is called The Nature Journal Connection, and I've put a link to the website of John Muir Laws where you can watch the whole series of 40 videos. I really appreciated Jamie's comments about tools, the story of buying the imitation paint set and enjoying it and continuing to use it made me smile. Jamie's right. We can get hung up on tools and forget that making marks and gaining pencil miles is what's important. Explore the tools you have and see what they can do. To find out more about Jamie, head to the show notes where you'll find links to her YouTube channel and Instagram page. Also, if you're listening from Malaysia, there's a link to an Instagram group Jamie created called Nature Journaling Malaysia, where you can connect with others. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.